It's a pleasure now to invite our two keynote speakers to the stage. Andrew Firestone was first introduced to the hotel business working on a project management for Shiloh Inns in Portland, Oregon. Andrew held positions in both operations and development for the 52-hotel independent chain. In the fall of 2014, Andrew and Jess Parker founded Stone Park Capital in order to focus on both development and acquisition opportunities in hospitality, and now the portfolio consists of 5 hotel properties and 473 guest rooms. Adam Firestone began making beer with converted winemaking equipment with decidedly mixed results. In 1995, he teamed up with his brother-in-law, David Walker, and the duo formed Firestone Walker Brewing Company. Over the next 2 decades, the brewery grew to become the nation's 9th largest craft brewer with 640 passionate employees. The company now operates 3 facilities in Paso Robles, and while their beers are distributed worldwide, more than 80% of them are consumed within 250 miles of the main brewery. Actually, I think 75% of them are consumed within 25 miles of the main brewery. Please join me in welcoming brothers Andrew and Adam Firestone.
Thank you. First question is, did we get the wine? I hope we did. I make a lot more sense the more wine you've had. In fact, if you haven't had any wine, I don't make any sense at all. He'll make even less sense. If you're not sure if you've had enough, if you look at me right now and I'm standing still, you've had enough. No. It's a treat to be here. This is our home. This is our hometown crew, and I get to travel quite a bit selling beer, but it's a privilege to be able to chat with you a little bit this afternoon about growing businesses on the Central Coast. So we're going to go back and forth here a little bit. The character on my left, your right, normally doesn't get a microphone. In fact, the last time he got a microphone, he started handing out roses to young ladies.
That was off limits. We talked about that. I got a longer introduction. You didn't get to talk about that.
No, I was actually asked on behalf of our whole family to apologize to the Central Coast for those 13 weeks of nightly embarrassment. So thankfully that's gone. It's over. So without further ado, I will introduce my brother right here. In fact, just one last thing. Mom isn't here. We wanted to become, we wanted to come here. They actually made the podiums this far apart because they were worried we'd start getting into some kind of contretemps here. But anyway, Andrew, what do you got to say?
Good afternoon, Andrew Firestone, it's a pleasure to be here. And first off, I want to say thank you to all the chambers, and especially to the SLO Chamber of Commerce. We recently opened a hotel in San Luis Obispo, and they were really, really valuable. They were incredible partners as we went through a long entitlement process, as we engaged the community and ultimately built our hotel. I am the younger brother. I got to watch my father build a business here on the Central Coast, starting the Firestone Winery back in 1975. I got to watch my brother build his business here on the Central Coast. And it was always my dream to find a way to get back here to the Central Coast, distill all the experience that I had, and try and build a business here. And it was a dream of mine that became a reality. And it wasn't overnight. It wasn't right away. It took a long time with a lot of bruised shins along the way, and we'll get into that a little bit. But I want to throw it back to my brother, who, aside from making beer, he also served our country. He was in Desert Storm. He has done all sorts of things as an attorney. But I'll kick it off by just talking about why and how did you come back to the Central Coast?
So we were both born and raised here, and then I left, as Andrew just indicated, he did too. And like Rizzolis and everyone else, and we've all heard that story. And it's hard to come back here because while the weather's great and it's gorgeous, all the reasons we love this, businesses can be tough here. And they can be tough because the opportunity isn't great, housing costs are high, and so on. I mean, you know, I'm talking to the chamber, you know the challenges that are out there. So my dream was always to have my own operation, and so I've always felt I had this burning desire. I was going to start this little lemonade shack, which I did. And the first lesson, I wrote a business plan. I wasn't very good at it. I shopped it all over. Some of you in this room or might know people. Some of the bankers are here, definitely saw it. I got no investors and no support, which tells you about my business plan writing. So I wanted to find a partner, and I tried that. I couldn't find a partner either. And then eventually, actually, my sister found the partner, who was my brother-in-law, who ended up as the only guy who would participate with me in this deal. And David Walker conveniently had no money, and he knew nothing about the beverage industry. That's why it's taken 27 years or whatever it's been since then. But so was Modest. We got one character out of UC Davis. He actually lived in our house. We paid him $9 an hour. He was a brewer, great guy who started with us, but I had an employee, and that was our beginning. So it was pretty hokey at the very early days. First thing that I'd share with you, and it was a sort of a guiding principle for us, is we felt that what was most important at the very beginning was, beer's been around 8,000 years. There was nothing that we knew that we could add to the recipe of beer that hasn't changed that long. So what we knew we had to do was have absolutely perfect business fundamentals. And when you have an industry as crowded and complicated as the beer industry, you have to have you just can't miss on any small degree. The margins are so small. So we did. We really fought that in the early days, and we had to. Cash flow, all the fundamentals you've ever heard of. And it's too short this afternoon to go through all those details, but it wasn't just HR like you heard about getting the right people. It wasn't just cash flow, although cash flow is so critical at the early days. Financing, all the integral parts that went into us getting off the ground and just staying alive to the next customer, to the next customer, to the next customer. But our guiding principle was, beyond good business practices, is we had to connect to the community. And our goal was always, we have to be able to sell something that our neighbors want. Because if it can work here, we can transport it across the street. Then we can transport it, up all the way out of the town of Buellton, as far as Solvang, and we can sell it in Solvang, then you can sell it in maybe Santa Maria and Santa Barbara and so on. And we did believe in this viral concept of business. And the key to that was connecting to the community. And we're going to talk, I think, both of us back and forth a little bit about how one goes about that and how critical that is, because you have so many great ideas in your head about, the beer should taste like this and the product should look like that, and I'm so proud of everything that I've been doing. But sometimes you develop almost a deafness. And it's a deafness because you're so infatuated with your product and what you want it to do, and you've stopped listening to the customer, to the community. And so maybe that was our first guiding principle that got us off the ground. Did you have any guiding principles you want to share here today?
So one of the things, starting a business, and I had to learn early on, and that caused some of the trials along the way, was that you need more than just a great idea and a ton of enthusiasm. There's a lot of great ideas that never make it off the ground because they aren't put together correctly. They're not capitalized correctly. They don't have a strict set of disciplines that you start off when you're putting this thing together. And one of the things that I learned from my father, and I learned from my brother, and all the people that have mentored me along the way, was you need to temper your enthusiasm. You need to look critically at your idea, because everybody else is going to. But then put together a set of check marks that you have to follow each step along the way, and leave a breadcrumb trail. The breadcrumb trail has been incredibly valuable in an extended entitlement process to develop hotels or to build a business. Because if you make a decision 6 months ago, and all of a sudden you are feeling the repercussions of that decision, whether it's positive or whether it's negative, sometimes you don't remember what led me to this decision, or what happened back then, what was the condition back then that made that happen. So all along the way, I write myself notes, I wrote myself memos along the way. So when I got to a place in which I found myself successful, then I knew why that happened. But most often, when something went wrong, I could go back and trace those steps. But this all led me to try and figure out how could I build a business here on the Central Coast. And of course, we've got amazing weather, all the topography, all the things that we've talked about before. But this is a community, a part of the world that cares so much about where they live, that is so intensely involved in government, in the growth or the non-growth of the community, that it was important that we put together a business plan that not just incorporated our ideas, but it was what the community would expect from us, how we would approach going through our business plan, how we would approach the governing bodies and the community to try and put together the deals that we wanted to put together. Now, along the way, of course, there are trials and tribulations, and I think that the most important thing that I learned here on the Central Coast was discipline, was making sure that you stuck to those principles all along the way. And if something wasn't right, if the capital stack wasn't right, if something didn't come together correctly, you had the discipline to either stop and fix it or abandon it altogether. And you had to have that discipline. You couldn't let the enthusiasm or the thought that you knew, my idea is so great, I can just steamroll all of those other things. So let's talk a little bit about running into trouble and stubbing our toe. And I don't want to talk about myself, but Mr. Firestone, maybe you could tell us a couple of the trials and tribulations. Maybe a stinky pond incident comes to mind up there at the brewery a year ago, I suppose.
Listening to the community. So some of what Andrew said is correct and worth listening to. I'll go back to the idea of sometimes you have to listen as you develop the product, because you finally got it in the bottle, you've got it in the market, it's selling. You finally get the cash flow. After several years, you're cash flow positive, and then maybe you're actually operating in the black at some point. But challenges do come along the way, and there's a couple different ways you can react to the challenges. I'll give you the example as Andrew's prompted. And we're going to go back to The Bachelor now too, by the way. So some of you may have read newspaper, the Slow Tribune, which for about 6 weeks ran us on the front page every day, thanks for the Tribune. But anyway, because we had installed a new wastewater system up in Paso, and we had finally arrived. We put some wastewater ponds in. We did everything right, state-of-the-art, as green, environmentally sustainable a system as you can absolutely do. We were in the drought back then. This is 2015. And this is my version of the story. I know a lot of you may have heard this story. Anybody who lives in the North County felt the story. So the ponds were filled with wastewater, as we were told. Everything's going fine at the beginning, and they're supposed to bubble over nicely, and they're aerobic ponds. And aerobic ponds mean that all those, the waste, which is nothing more than sort of yeast and grain and so on, it's not black water, it's our gray water, rinse water that comes out of the brewery, would all digest in these ponds beautifully, and the water is recycled, it's clean, then it's distributed on the land, or it goes back to into the river clean. That's the idea. That's what we had paid for. That's what the engineers had promised, but those of you who live up in that area, or those of you who read the paper, know that about the middle of March, all of a sudden, the ponds, as soon as they were full, went anaerobic. And anaerobic is that tremendous smell you get when you lift the lid off your septic tank, or the Marburg porta potty guy comes outside your door for too long. Imagine that, instead of a porta potty that's this big, it's about 10 acres of porta potties. And so this giant bevy of odor all of a sudden started to encapsulate most of Paso Robles. It was fine when the winds were blowing, but it really wasn't. And I'm saying it was some, joking and mirth right now, but I tell you, it was one of the stressful points of my life. And it was the most stressful points of our career, because all of a sudden, all the hard work that we had done for all these years to earn the trust of our neighbors and, convince them not to drink Coors Light, but to try our beers and so on, was disappearing overnight. The emails, the text, the social media, and so on was absolutely crushing. It didn't help that KSBY was there every day with a camera and interviewing everybody in the street, and of course it was terrible. It was 100 degrees, and this odor was horrible. So what do you do? What do you do? I mean, what crisis management do you do in this? And David and I sat around in the office, and just as the phones were ringing off the hook, and the answer is, you just, same tenacity, you go right back at it. You don't run from it. You don't pretend it's not happening. You just face it, and we owned it. Most of South Paso ate in our tap room free for several months. No kidding. Some of them were staying in hotels at our expense for several months. I mean, we got to the point, it almost bankrupted us. That's how bad that problem was. And the engineers always saying, patience, 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 it will flip. Now, there was another company, and I'm not going to get into details because there's different tactics, but there was a company, a beverage company up in North County that got in some trouble because somebody made a decision to put a pond in. In that case, it was a reservoir, and they took some trees down, and they probably had a deaf ear. I'm sure, in all seriousness, I think it probably happened because no one was paying attention, and the grading guys went out, and they put the pond in and weren't listening. I don't know the background. My point is, after it happened, the community, this community, had a huge uprising against this winery when that happened. Our strategy, I would submit to you, as part of the community, when you grow up and you live next door to the neighbor, your kids are in the elementary school, and you're going to hear it from everyone else in the community because they're feeling it, was to just face it, to address it, to be there every single day, to be on camera, not hide from it, and that means house everybody and feed them and so on, and promise them that we're doing everything we possibly could, which we did, and eventually, after about 3 weeks, they flipped and went back aerobic again, and you haven't smelt it ever since. Although, I'll tell you this, every time the city of Paso has a problem with their wastewater plant, it's like, the brewery's doing it again, so it's not us. Anyway, that was my example, and that was how we treated it, and why all those years of work with the community was so important to us, why it almost bankrupted us, and why we came back to it. Andrew's got an example, if I get it right, about how do you face challenges that are sometimes within the community. It isn't an environmental problem that's happened, it's just differences of opinion. And tell them that Andrew once worked for Ty Warner down in Santa Barbara, who owned the Miramar Hotel for a chapter, and share with them that episode and how you learned from it.
So one of my positions in hospitality over the years, I worked for Ty Warner Hotels and Resorts, and he owned the Miramar project down in near Montecito. And many of you know that it's now been finally built. This is now almost 12 years later. It's been built and opened. But I was there and saw some of the ways that we were going about trying to build this project. And there was a big piece of the puzzle that was missing. And it may not be missing if you're doing it in another part of the country, which was community engagement and presenting this to the neighbors that are going to be living with it. We recently opened a hotel here up in San Luis Obispo, and it took nearly 6 years to get it built. And if you looked at it from 100 feet, it was where a hotel was supposed to be built. It was within the parameters of what was supposed to be built. But what you didn't see was that there were neighbors across a creek that would be impacted with their view lines of this hotel. And this became, it was very evident to me. And previously, other hoteliers had tried to come in and build a hotel here and didn't have that same, I think, sensitivity or understanding. And one of the things that we really tried to do was understand the impacts of what we were doing to our neighbors. Because in a lot of other communities, the neighbors wouldn't get as involved as they will here in the Central Coast, because this is a place that we hold dear and that we love. I spent countless hours in meetings with our neighbors, not only neighboring businesses, but most importantly, residents of San Luis Obispo that had been there for years, decades, and were very concerned about the change that was going on. And change makes people anxious. Innovation can make people anxious. And I think the Rizzolis were talking a little bit before, the way that things are done, and as they change, it makes people nervous. And development is no different. And I think that we're going through this interesting time, especially here in San Luis Obispo County, where there is change going on. There is this growth versus, whether it's going to be more dense or it's going to be sprawl. What is the direction for San Luis Obispo? How does it grow correctly? Now back to my experience, and we did finally get our approvals. I hope that we made the concessions that we needed to make the neighbors across the creek happy with plantings, with design, things like that. But this wouldn't happen in most. I've built hotels in other communities. I've never had the type of community engagement like I did here in San Luis Obispo. This is a unique place, and that's why I think that you see when businesses succeed here, they really succeed because they know what it takes. The business side, of course, but the community side. And I think my brother over here has done an amazing job in engaging the community, not just as a business, but as a product with the evolution of 805 beer and how I'm not sure if there's another business that so clearly defines what the 805, I think, is, at least in your interpretation, and how that's grown.
So one of the ideas that we're kind of pushing to you here, and it's probably something we all know innately. In LA, we have our Venice facility down there. People in LA, they don't know who their congressman is. They don't know who their supervisor is. They don't know what supervisorial district they live in. They don't actually care. It's just not material to them. Whereas here, a supervisor's race may spend more money than a congressional race in other districts in the United States. And it just speaks to the passion of the community. And as Andrew mentioned, if you have this vibrant, engaged community, as a business owner, you've got a choice. You can either sort of come in a corporate world and just say, too bad, talk to the hand, this is what I'm going to do. And the community may push back. Or you can take a strategy that's going to listen to that, to figure out how to, no one's got malevolent ideas and ill will. They just have different ideas. And at the end of the day, if you can look at it like that and say, someone's not really sure, Adam, about the tanks that you're going to put in. It's not because they don't want the tanks, they hate you, or it's personal. They just have a different vision. And they're not wrong, it's just different. And I think one of our sort of key lessons that I would share to the chamber and to anybody in business in Central Coast is just keep that in mind. It's not an opposition, it's just differences of opinion. And your challenge as a business owner, as ours are, is to harmonize those various ideas. And if you really put your heart and soul to it, eventually you'll find something that does or can achieve that harmony. You may not get everything you want, but you'll get something that can work. If you believe in the Central Coast, and I know you all do, because that's what the Chamber is about. That's about building businesses here. That's about committing back. You're spending good time networking with each other, because it's important that we all do that. For our part, modestly, we wanted to make a beer. I mean, it wasn't that creative, for God's sake. The telephone company came up with the name, right? And originally I thought, well, how do you have a local beer that all the locals would know? How would they not forget it? There's so many beers on the shelf and so on. I said, well, if it's the first three numbers of their telephone, they're probably going to remember us. That was the theory that we went in. And so we then developed this beer, but we realized that it started to export a little bit. And it was because all the folks that would come and stay in the hotels, that would visit all the businesses and so on in the Central Coast and had a great experience, might encounter the beer, and they started carrying it elsewhere. And we made a decision then, because we believed in the community so much, let's keep the marketing and everything else all about here. And so our version of that and our interpretation of the Central Coast, that there's only two types of customers in the Central Coast. You don't have to agree with this, it's just Adam's view of the world. There's cowboys and surfers. Everybody in the Central Coast is one or other. I promise you. Now, that doesn't mean if you're a cowboy that you actually have cows or a horse, but you might have a hat, you listen to Garth Brooks, you kind of bend that way, maybe you line dance on the side and no one knows. And the surfing crowd, by the way, you might be, gray-haired and listen to Jimmy Buffett, you don't actually surf anymore, but you did once, you had a skateboard, your kid does, and so on, you wear Hawaiian shirts, and that's who you are. But if you start looking at, we did in this filter, so everything you see in our marketing and our talks are all about trying to identify with you, us, in the Central Coast as one or other of those. So all of 805 was that. And that was our way of trying to express the Central Coast. Now, if you have any doubt whether the Central Coast is a good message to carry out, let me submit to you that the fastest growing craft beer in the United States, per account, bar none, more than Corona, more than Bud Light, is 805. Marketing. Now, we're not all over the United States. We're only in 3 states. That's fine. We've got one brewery. We're going to catch up. Let's not get ahead of our skis here a little bit too far. But my point is simply that I hope as you look at it, you drink it elsewhere, and you share it with your friends and so on, and you see it in towns other than here. People drink it in Hanford or Bakersfield because they want to be here and they know they're going to be here on the weekend. And that's what they remember. I'm serious. They come down to 46, and they come right through the brewery, they stop and they keep going, and they go to all the businesses and hotels on the coast. And that's their memory, and that's what they remember of it. Same in LA, same in San Francisco. It's an uncanny place, and I would encourage everyone, especially those of you who are marketing on the tourist side and to the consumer product groups, to embrace the Central Coast, the grit that we are, the cowboys and the surfers, the landscape, and everything else, because it's a great message. It works, or it's worked for us anyway. So, anyway, how do you get, at the end of the day in the hotel business, it's all about heads and beds. And it's a competitive world out there. The La Quintas that I know, and we were talking about earlier, were the old stucco ones with the popcorn ceilings and the vinyl chair that you would get, and it was about $60, and you get them in West Texas. You're on the road on the side of the I-40, out there trying to sell product. Why don't you have any of those recliner vinyl chairs in the new La Quinta?
We replaced all those. It was our vision, when we started our hospitality company, was to make sure that we cast a wide a net as possible so we could cater to any visitor. Whether you were a business traveler, you were a team that was visiting for a tournament, family for a vacation or a wedding or what have you. And what I saw here in the Central Coast is that people that visit here don't like to stay in their hotel. When they come to visit San Luis Obispo, they want to go to Morro Bay, they want to go to Hearst Castle, Pismo Beach, they want to go taste these amazing wines that we have here. We wanted to create a place where people could come and get a comfortable night's rest at an affordable price and be happy with their stay and come experience everything that the Central Coast has to offer. I was so lucky to have been born and raised here, and I'm a little bit cowboy, a little bit surfer, and the reason that people come to this area is because it is so beautiful. And the reason it is so beautiful is because the community cares so much about what it's putting out there. And the reason that, that San Luis and Santa Barbara, all these places are so pristine is because there's an involved community that has their voices heard and dictates the direction of the Central Coast. And that's why it's become such a destination. It's become a culture. It's become a tagline almost. What is on the Central Coast? And our role in the terms of hospitality was just to create. We saw a need. We saw there was demand for this type of product, and we wanted to do it as efficiently as possible. And I had to put away some of my grand designs of what it was. I worked for a guy that had 2 Four Seasons properties, a beachfront resort in Cabo San Lucas, and think about what would fit best, or what I think would fit best in this particular community or that particular community. We have 2 hotels in Santa Barbara and 1 here in San Luis Obispo, and they're all different. They're all different, and they serve different needs. We have a hotel in San Luis Obispo that's right near the Cal Poly campus and services a lot of families that are going in and out of there, professors. We have a hotel that's a block off the beach down in Santa Barbara, and that's people coming, they want to go to the beach. We give them beach cruisers to go to the beach. And so not every one of our properties is similar in any way other than they have beds and showers. Everything else has been customized for what that market is. But more than anything, I want to have a successful business here in the Central Coast. Again, because I lived here, but because I want to be here. This is where I love being able to host people that are coming here for the first time or for the 1,000th time that want to be here as well. And hopefully our hotels satisfy and scratch that itch.
I give one last closing thought, and you can tell I'm a booster for the Central Coast. We are, as you say, all in gambling. And most of you are all in as well. This isn't a transitory population. I was given a chat to some folks out of state. It was a place where the utility bill was about a quarter of what we pay here. They could get labor all day long, no housing issues, cost of living, regulation. You want to build a warehouse, it's a 90-day process. You go down to the building department, they say, thank you, we need the revenue. I want to give you a hug. You're in the paper. The mayor comes and cuts the ribbon. These places do exist. So, and this group, they asked me, they said, Adam, God, we read all these stories. It took you 3 years to get your Venice place open. You were putting a restaurant inside a restaurant. It took you 3 years to get your CO for that. You didn't do anything. You didn't change the footprint. How can it be so hard? And you're right, it is. So you have 2 choices. you can get out and you can bellyache about it and say, oh, it ain't fair, right? It's sort of like the guy who goes outside and tells everybody else it's raining, as if everybody else outside doesn't know it's raining. It is raining. There is a trade-off for all this community participation. There is a trade-off. Not every regulation makes sense to me. Okay, deal with it. The point of it all is, and what I would submit to you, is that endurance that you need in business in general, just to stick with your marketing plan and your business plan and your cash flow and all the other requirements. There's one specific one in the Central Coast you have to have. And the developers in the room, the guys who try to build hotels, and so you know that anyone who's tried to start a business, it is hard. It is dang hard. You're going to go through hoops here that you won't go through anywhere else. You're going to pay fees and prices and things you won't pay for anywhere else. But I told this community, I said, at the end of the day, if I'm the last brewery in California, because everyone else has changed, that'll just show that we had more stick-it-to-itness than anyone else. That at the end of the day, if you really believe in the community, it's worth it as it goes through there. And by the way, if you're the only beer they can drink, it's not a bad thing either. So my message is believe in the Central Coast, believe in us hometown. It's a long road. It may take you 25 years to spread the love around in 12-ounce increments to the United States, but it's well worth the effort. Thank you. Okay.
So we do have a few minutes if we have questions. Again, I know they passed papers out. If you've written a question down, there are people who are going to walk around and get those and bring them up, and we'll see if we can stump the panel here. And it's going to be a challenge with this panel, but...
I have a question. How many roses did you get at the initial?
Okay, all right. Right away.
Oh, just shout it out. What the heck? Anybody got one?
Who's got a question? Right in front.
Talk about your breadcrumbs. I love the idea of if you don't know how it's working, you can't fix it when it's broken. Can you talk a little bit about that, how you use that to leverage your ability to really scale your business and learn from mistakes?
Yeah, there's a hot wash that you do once you've finished the. My Marine brother is incredibly organized. I'm less so. But I gleaned some information from him. One is the breadcrumb trail. And so basically, when you're going through any business plan, when you're building, when you're going through your financing, or you're creating your whatever your capital stack is, you're going to make decisions along the way that will get fuzzy in your memory over time. And even though you might have documentation along the way, what you forget, or what I often forget, is what was going on at that time that made me make that decision. Maybe interest rates were in a different place. Maybe my tolerance for risk was different. But not remembering why you got to this place is really frustrating. It's really frustrating. And making sure that that all those decisions are culminating in this, in this situation are remembered. And that's so you don't do that again if you get to a bad place. And then you can go back and look. The second thing, upon completion of a project, so we just finished construction of our hotel in San Luis Obispo, we go through this hot wash process that I learned from my brother, which is to sit everybody down, all the stakeholders, contractors, subcontractors, bankers. I know Community West is here somewhere. And you go through and you analyze every step of the way, because you don't want to make the same mistake twice. And if you do make the same mistake twice, it's your own fault. So that hot wash upon completion of a project, but the breadcrumb trail all along the way.
All right, we have questions. I'll read the question.
Can you read that one?
Oh, yeah, I can read it. So this one's for Adam. How big do you visualize becoming, always here in the Central Coast only?
Growth. Growth is a really interesting challenge, because sometimes you start with something you really love and it gets to a certain position, and then the fun goes away. And the fun goes away, and then sometimes the quality goes away, and you end up in a place you didn't intend to start at the beginning, even close. And you say, how did that happen to us? So the question is, how do you grow? I'd love to grow as long as we're still able to do the same product with the same attention to detail, with the same quality, and it has the same reaction in the customer. Then the growth to me is organic and it's natural. I've seen brands, consumer product brands, that just push it out into the market. They're just going for volume. Maybe they're doing an IPO, they're doing something. There's a reason that they artificially drive something out there. And it kills a brand. If you're building something for the long haul, we're trying to make this a multi-generational business. You can't do that. You've got to resist that temptation just to force the business to a place it shouldn't be. And so that's a very weak way to answer a really good question. But you have to be able to have a sense for the DNA of your business, and you have to be able to know, am I pushing it too far, too fast? Marathon runners out there, you know how much training you can do before you overtrain. And businesses are the same way. So any of the runners out there understand what I'm saying, and other sports, I'm sure it's the same. You take it as far as it can naturally and organically go, then maybe just dial it back a little bit, and it'll grow of its own initiative and momentum. So.
Okay, Andrew, you're up.
Oh, boy.
How do you combat employee turnover in the hospitality or entry-level business, low wages, cost of living, which we know is real high here on the Central Coast?
Yeah, that is a long discussion, and it's basically it's employee retention, and also the cost of labor going up. Part of it is organic with just cost of living, things getting more expensive. Some of it are inputs from government, just raising minimum wage arbitrarily, and so it is incredibly difficult. And our business is allowed to pass that increased cost to our customers. But it is difficult because when you can't keep an employee, and it's a good employee, but your business model doesn't allow you to pay them increase over increase. I can't pay a room attendant, an increase over year, and it's natural that they're going to go find other employment. And that's just one of the detriments of an industry that's labor intensive. And we just have to do our best to try and find employees that are trained well, that like their environment in which they're working. But that is one of the most complicated and difficult things about our business. We have a beautiful hotel in a great location that's doing well, but if you don't have the people in there that are making that experience right, it won't succeed.
How many of you in here are in the restaurant business or loan to restaurateurs? You're a landlord to a restaurant. Anybody? Some of you? Okay. Those that are in there know that not that long ago, tipped employees were $5.25 an hour, right? They worked for tips. They didn't work for the $5.25.
I didn't know we were going to go here, Adam. We're going to go here. All right.
We're going.
There you go. Go for it.
And all of a sudden now, in the city of LA, we're going to $15 an hour. And with the idea that there's lots of reasons for it, but it's happening, and there's a deafness in my mind to that reality. So the business, like us, we have a good piece of restaurant. We have the 3 restaurants, and so that is right in that crucible of how do you get the labor and how do you maintain the labor. Our labor costs have gone up by 300% in 5, 6, 7 years. It's a number that's completely unsustainable to the restaurant business. So we're doing what every good business owner should do. We're eliminating staff because the model doesn't work. You will not pay $12 a beer for a pint of beer. You, as customers, are not prepared to do that. You're not going to pay $25 for a burger. But the burger used to be, $10, $11. It needs to be $25 to carry that labor cost all the way through. Mm-hmm. So we're changing the model. As the business, we're changing the model. We're going to quick serve retail, and you're seeing that in so many restaurants now at the sort of low and middle end. It's a huge challenge for us all. Automation.
Hotels are faced with that same challenge, and there are ways that technology is going to take the place of some of that staff. And that's the last thing that I want to do, because I am the hospitality aspect, the guest experience is such a big deal to me. But you will find a time where you book a hotel room and you're just going to get an RFID code, and you won't even go up to the front desk. You'll go to your room. You'll put your scanner on your room. You won't talk to anybody. You won't see it. You just go right to your room, and that's the way it's going to go. I don't want that to be the case. We won't be the first to do that, but that is a direction that could go. You see the kiosks in fast food restaurants as they're replacing staff when you take your order, when you start pressing those buttons. And gosh, I have a weird thing about giving my order to a screen. I like talking to somebody. I like that interaction, but like you said, people aren't going to be willing to pay the price that it's going to cost to price those items.
We can do one more question, right in the back there.
What about the recruiting aspect, especially in manufacturing?
So the question here is, how do we recruit for manufacturing? First thing, which we do, we have an HR department that is out working this every day. You look at the community assets we have. I'm sure you guys have all thought about this. You know, Cal Poly is a phenomenal asset to this community. It is, I get to teach a class at the Orfalea Business School down there, and I mean, I want to hire them all. There is so much talent here, and we've got a Mustang alumnus club at the brewery that's about a third of our top managers now. I'm serious, 33% and growing. So for engineering staff, for food science, we use a lot of that. For a lot of the production side, it's amazing the talent that comes out of Cal Poly. You've got to pay. They're not cheap, but they're talented and they're capable of asking for it. So for our employee retention and staff, we do a very open book profit share. The team shares in it, and the millennials want data. They want to know what's going on. You heard it from the Rizzolis earlier, how important that is to them, and they are. They want to know what you're going to do. They will change jobs faster than I change socks if you don't provide those kind of opportunities for them. The other side of it is all the technical resources that I have. My daughter works for Glassdoor out of San Francisco now. The ability, Monster.com and so on, the web has made it such a flat environment for you to get additional names. But I promise we will hire somebody from this community 10 times more against someone who's going to relocate from somewhere else. And this is completely selfish. It's not because the person from outside is not as qualified. I'm saying as between two equally qualified people. I hope this isn't lawyers legal to do this, but we will hire.
Too late.
Too late. We will hire from here because inevitably mom lives here. If mom lives here, then she's happy, he's happy, and then you end up like these two knuckleheads staying in the community because, well, mom's not here because she thought we would fight, so we hire from the community because our experience has shown 9 times out of 10, the person from the community will stay with us. And we've got incredible retention as a result. We've got folks that are in 15 years,
They get
20
free
years.
beer too, so that helps.
Free beer.
Adam and Andrew, on behalf of the Symposium, we thank you very much for coming here today, sharing your views. Thank you for being local guys that came back here and have shown yourself to be members of our community. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
So on behalf of Andre Morrison Buttery, I'd like to thank you all for coming here today. At this time, I'd like to introduce Jocelyn Brennan. She is chair of the Central Coast Coalition of Chambers, and she's going to make some closing remarks. Jocelyn.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to Michael and the team at Andre Morrison Buttery. This was their idea for a one-time client appreciation event for their 10-year anniversary. They did it 1 year, and here we are 11 years later, so thank you to them. I know that shows not only their commitment to the business community and their sponsors' commitment to the business community, but that shows a hunger of the Central Coast business community for an event like this. And so the Central Coast Coalition of Chambers is very honored and privileged to kind of take that baton and continue bringing this event to the business community on the Central Coast of San Luis Obispo County and Santa Barbara County. The Central Coast Coalition of Chambers is made up of 13 chambers. So the Paso Robles Chamber, the Templeton Chamber, the Atascadero Chamber, Cambria, Los Osos, Morro Bay, San Luis Obispo, Pismo Beach, the South County Chambers of Commerce, Santa Maria, Lompoc, Solvang, and Buellton. That is the Central Coast Coalition of Chambers. I know that you have been inspired today and that you've had some things that you've jotted down that are takeaways that you can take back to your company, ideas you can implement with your employees. We hope that you will review the video. So thank you to TriMotion Media for recording these clips today, and check in with your local chamber. We're hoping to have these up by end of next week, so check in with your local chamber. They should have it linked on their website next week. Also, when you leave today, you will get an email with a survey. So please take the time to fill that out while this is fresh in your mind. We really value your feedback, and we want to keep bringing speakers and topics that speak to the issues that Central Coast businesses are facing. I have to give a little plug for Arroyo Grande. Tonight is the second Thursday of the month, and so there's something called Village Nights in the village. All the businesses are open late, so if you want to continue networking or go out for drinks, I would encourage you to go to the village tonight. And then lastly, I cannot thank the Clark Center team enough. We did have a little issue with the wine tonight, and they just pulled a rabbit out of the hat, and hopefully no one even noticed, so thank you to the Clark Center. Let's give them a big round of applause. Again, thank you for being here on behalf of the Central Coast Coalition of Chambers. Thank you, and we look forward to seeing you next year.
Has to offer. I was so lucky to have been born and raised here, and I'm a little bit cowboy, a little bit surfer, and the reason that people come to this area is because it is so beautiful, and the reason it is so beautiful is because the community cares so much about what it's putting out there.
My message is believe in the Central Coast, believe in us hometown. It's a long road. It may take you 25 years to spread the love around in 12-ounce increments to the United States, but it's well worth the effort. Thank you.